Thank you for joining LinkedIn Live, Designing the Modern Hub Airport. Airports are much more than a way to get on and off an aircraft. They represent the values and aspirations of people who live, work, and play in a community. They are where millions of travelers form their opinions about a region's civic identity each year. So, how do you plan and design a beautiful, functional, and sustainable airport that represents this identity? Hello and welcome. I'm Matt Needham, Director of Aviation and Transportation at HOK. And for the next 20 to 30 minutes, we're going to explore how the design of the new Salt Lake City International Airport provides flexibility and growth for the airport, supports sustainability, and celebrates the passenger experience. Salt Lake City's Airport Development Program, also known as the new SLC, replaces three aging facilities that were built in the 1960s with a highly efficient, affordable, and beautiful airport. It's the largest public works project in Utah's history and the first new U.S. hub airport in the 21st century. The first phase opened in 2020 with the completion of the Central Terminal Building and 45 gates in concourses A and B. The second phase was completed this past fall with the expansion of the eastern portion of Concourse A with 22 gates. The remaining two phases are under construction now, with phase 3 slated to open in the fall of 24 and phase 4 by 26, totaling around 95 gates, all new. I'm joined today by Mike Williams, the Program Director for the new SLC, and HOK's Alan Bright and Claire Moore, who served as Design Principal and Lead Structural Engineer for this project. We'd also like to hear from you, so please leave your questions and comments in the chat, and we'll try to incorporate your thoughts into this conversation. So let's get started. So this question is probably for Alan and Mike. Can you tell us more about the Salt Lake City International Airport's new passenger terminal and its design?
Yes, Mike, if you're okay, I'll start, and then so I started working on the Salt Lake City Airport with the team back in 2008. So I've been working on it for 15 years. And back at that point in time, the idea was to really have a collaborative, integrated team to talk about what is the vision for the new airport. And during that process with the users and the different groups, with the director of the airport, Maureen Riley, and the others that were part of the team, and Delta Airlines, we all sat down together and started looking at what do we want to make this airport to be, this new modern airport that really is emphasizing a number of elements that are important to the place. And those elements included passenger experience was number one. The idea about bringing the wonder of flight, where many years ago, many decades ago, you could actually almost walk out and you could watch the aircraft come and go. That was a really important element to make sure that people could see that again, maybe do that in the new airport. Celebrate the sense of place. Utah's natural beauty was a very big part of the design of the airport through what you can see, the materials. We'll talk about that a little bit later, in the overall building, the art that's integrated into it. The idea about the culture of Utah and the culture of Salt Lake City, the idea about the family room, and we'll talk a little bit about that, where the family room is a meeters and greeters hall where people that are, it's very common in Utah and other states too, but to have missionaries from the LDS Church to go out and leave for 2 years and go to other countries and then come back. So the idea of having a family room where people could actually say goodbye and greet their families and loved ones coming back was really important to this airport and fairly special to this airport. The idea about art and architecture really blending and working together to make an amazing experience. Sustainability was extremely important to the design of the airport as we go through it. And that it's a regional gateway. It's something that when you come and go from Salt Lake City and from Utah, that it truly was this gateway that was specific to the place. And that became kind of the guiding principles for the overall design of the airport. And one other one that came out during the visiting session was to minimize level changes. And this is a very large airport, but the airport that they were all coming from at the time was smaller. People loved the fact they could get out of the car and quickly go up and down and get into their hold areas and go out to the aircraft. And the leaders of this in the visioning really wanted to make sure that even though it's going to be a much bigger airport, that it was very simple in wayfinding, super clear, and that we could minimize the amount of level changes. And ultimately, the design team and the builders and the group actually were able to come up with the ability to get onto the site with your vehicle or other transportation, go into what is referred to as the gateway building of the main building, where you can ticket and check your bags. You cross bridges across all the cars that are below you, and then go into the main hall where you actually start to go through ticketing and ultimately through TSA, where you're going through security. You're still on the same level. You go through security and you end up what we refer to as the canyon, which was this clarity of design of the overall building that everybody can walk down, see through, see the aircraft, and shop. And it was just this crystal clear layout and design of people as movement. So it made it really simple, and you never had to change a level. You could go all the way out to the aircraft and then come back from the aircraft, not changing the level, get your bags, and then go down to get back onto a car or the light rail station that comes to the airport, or other means of transportation, or a rental car. So it was looking for clarity and simplicity in movement and servicing all the passengers, and really celebrating Utah and its natural beauty.
Here's another question for kind of the group. And Alan hinted on it. Our new passenger terminal complex, pays kind of tribute to Utah's natural beauty. How can design highlight a city or region and its local culture?
So I guess I can start on that, and we can have others come in. So during that whole visioning process, again, it was very important to be something that was sense of place, sense of Utah. So we began looking at materials to be using, the colors that we use in the building. And if you experience going through the Salt Lake City airport, you will see the natural colors that we've taken from the mountain ranges, and the colors change up and down throughout Utah. So there's reds and there's oranges and there's browns and stuff that are used throughout that, just in the colors. The idea about bringing the culture in, I mentioned the LDS church and the missionaries, about bringing that culture in and actually serving the actual groups that are part of the overall area. Looking at art integration was a really important part in the restrooms that are throughout the airport. They sent out the invitation for local artists to actually be part of that. So we call what was referred to as the whimsy wall. So each of the restrooms have a special art feature that represents Utah or the local artists. So they're all very special, the way we integrated all, I think, the colors, the materials, and then being able to, when you walk through the facility, what we refer to as the canyon, kind of the main slot that you walk down where all the shopping is, that is integrating art. You can see it here where the canyon is starting to be like the slot canyons of Utah. So the architecture and volume start to deal with the light that comes up from above. You can see it kind of right above, it kind of goes in that ceiling, drops back down, and daylights all those. And then the idea about the waving mountain canyons as you go through this space. And then when you get to the end, which is the plaza, at this canyon space, you start to look out towards all the mountain ranges, the Wasatch Mountain Range. So you're connected back to the place, the culture, all the way through your experience walking through the airport.
Okay, so now we're talking about design. Now let's talk about budgets. I don't know if, I think Mike has had a little bit of a technical difficulty. Okay.
It looks like we might have a little challenge to get him in there.
We're an integrated team, so let's
Yeah.
answer it together, right? So I think one of the things that we did fundamentally was we kind of changed the width of the concourses as you come out. The concourses towards the center, where there's much more passenger traffic, were wider to really serve an increased revenue for the airport. In fact, the concessions program, I think, more than doubled from the old airport, because it was so constrained in terms of its ability to actually offer food and beverage opportunities, which is one funding source that is pretty important for the long period of time. Another one is Salt Lake City has seen an incredible amount of rise in passenger traffic. I believe during the pandemic it was, and Mike, you can probably correct correct me or confirm, Salt Lake was the busiest airport in the country in late 2020. So there's a lot of reasons why cost and operations are incredibly important. The other is, speaking of the integrated team, the hub carrier Delta really had. We had worked with all the airlines, but this is their hub, and we had a very finite number of gates that needed to be open at all times. And so there was pretty much a 12-step phasing program that we undertook, and it's one of the reasons this program has been successful. Any adds to that?
I think that it was just so efficient in its layout too, and I know that Claire can probably touch on structural and MEP on the systems that we use to minimize not only short-term costs but long-term costs for the project. So I don't know, Claire, if you want to touch on a little bit of that.
I think can you all hear me? I think the camera just moved over, but one of the ways that the airport really is looking at protecting its investment, and one of the main drivers for why we built the brand new terminal as opposed to renovating the older facilities, was the fact that we are near this beautiful um, natural view of the mountains, but those mountains are also created by the Wasatch Fault. And so the high seismicity in this area is one of the challenges for designing the airport. And the airport, at the very beginning of the design, we sat down and really talked about not just meeting the current earthquake safety standards in the design of the buildings and structures, but also really looking at what was the performance that they needed out of the various facilities. So we went through each facility and just how long after an earthquake could there be some downtime, which elements needed higher levels of protection than are afforded by just following building codes. And so we tuned the performance objectives for each of the components of the airport, because the airport in its development was not just the terminal and the concourses, although those and the parking garage are the things that the public experiences the most. There's also all of the rental car facilities. There's also the central utility plant. And so we looked at all of the various components that make up the airport and really tune the seismic performance objectives for each one of those buildings. So that was one of the very first things, so that we could make sure that when this airport was up, operational, and in service for 50, 75 years, that it was going to provide the resilience for the community that they need out of this facility. I mean, so many people go in and out every day. And so that was an interesting challenge at the very beginning, because just based on the number of square feet and the number of buildings that are part of the overall development, I believe the airport itself is comprised of what looks like one large terminal and concourse, plus the tunnels that connect to Concourse B. But each one of those is actually structurally separate. This allows for thermal movements for the buildings in this very hot and very cold climate, and it also allows for the structural systems to be independent. So the airport complex is actually 29 separate structures that make up the overall complex. I think that was a kind of a mouthful. It was quite a challenge, but I think it was money well spent in order to really fit into the overall portfolio of the Salt Lake and Utah's strategy for earthquake hazard mitigation as well.
Yeah, and in terms of the investment, the other thing is the entire layout of the gates, so that the old airport was really a finger pier terminal complex, and now we have a dual Group 4 taxi lanes between concourses. We have the ability to grow to additional concourses. The ability to grow is, of course, key to a hub operation, and this is really designed for very quick and efficient connections for hub operations. So all that is, I think, an investment that that has been paying off because it has seen an incredible rise in passenger traffic just this year. Um, here's another question, and sustainability is at the forefront of our industry, and of course, sustainability is paired with resiliency as climate change is starting to kind of impact things. So, um, what sustainable design strategies and resilient design strategies were implemented at Salt Lake? And I think this is to both Alan and Claire.
Okay, Claire, do you want to start, or I can start whatever
Sure.
you.
Yeah. I can start in on that. I think I've talked about the seismic resilience part, about how the buildings can respond to earthquakes with minimal damage after an event and get back in operation very quickly. And we saw that out with the magna earthquakes. Um, but one of the other things that was a key goal and driver early in design was really a heavy focus on energy savings with the system selections of the building, and the choice of mechanical systems for the airport complex really helped drive a lot of the energy savings that led to the achievement of LEED Gold for the airport. And while there were a lot of different strategies, I just want to talk about those mechanical systems really quick. In that the mechanical engineering team really looked at not only the dry climate of Salt Lake City, but then also that's paired with the nature of airport spaces, which tend to be large volumes where the people are down at the bottom and there's quite a large volume of air. And so really looked at taking advantage of IDEC systems in order to reduce the cooling energy. And I believe the metric was about an 80% savings from the baseline in terms of cooling energy by using these systems. And then not just that choice of the air handling unit system, but then also pairing it with displacement air systems. So those are ones where the air is provided down at the passenger level and then allowed to naturally rise and stratify. And so where we're putting either the cool or the warm air right where it is experienced and lends to the thermal comfort of the passengers as they're waiting for their plane, but it also reduces fan energy usage. And so that was really a key strategy. There were many other strategies used because we have a lot of different types of spaces within an airport. But I thought the displacement air system was really intriguing because it was also integrated into the column covers. I don't know if those of you who've been in the airport have really noticed, but we hid them in the column covers, so the columns around the passenger seating areas are actually the conduits providing the air into the space. And I think we showed earlier there was the photo of that North Plaza area that has that large expanse of glass that allows you to see the views. Yeah, that one, that allows you to see the views out. And this was a really tricky challenge. I mean, in the cold times, you've got cold air that wants to come down that glass. But we wanted that space to be nice and comfortable. In the summer, it could get really warm, but our team worked really hard to figure out a really effective strategy. And so you can't really see it because it's under your feet, but there's a radiant slab in this area that provides the heating and cooling for that area of the airport. So a lot of different strategies that got integrated into the architecture so that they were going to blend into the overall scheme, but the metrics and the science behind those were really carefully chosen and tuned to really drive down the energy use of the airport. So the team is super proud of that.
Well, yeah, it's a challenge we gave you to make sure it did all that and hide it all so that it didn't interfere with any of the architecture of the building. And you can see from those pictures that you really accomplished that. And since we've been open since the fall of 2020, I mean, we've used these spaces. People sit in that big plaza area, and everybody is comfortable, and we haven't gotten complaints. So it really has worked.
Just a quick adding on this is it did receive LEED Gold certification, and as in any airport, there are two major things you have to move: passengers and their baggage. And so the bag system really, if you take a look at the energy that a bag system requires, it's an enormous amount of energy. So what we did implement in this facility is stop-start motors that really took advantage of any kind of pressure off the peak periods, so that those motors then turn off, and we able to save that energy load. That's another part of the whole energy modeling system that made that much more of a sustainable project.
We have you mentioned baggage system. We have a very unique baggage system here because it was designed for Utah. So we have a lot of skiers that come and visit here. So we have a lot of skis as checked baggage. So you can check oversized luggage, mainly skis, golf clubs, bike boxes, at any check-in position, any place on the airport, and it just gets inducted into the system. So that's pretty unique for a baggage system, but it has really performed well and has been very successful here at Salt Lake.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, I got another question probably for you, Mike. How did the project construction and timeline impact operations, or vice versa, in terms of airline gate availability, and just the major components of those phasing changes we had to do, that we discussed a little bit earlier?
Well, the team had to get together and figure out how we were going to phase this long project and how we were going to keep a minimum number of gates in operation all the time to support the traveling public and the aircraft that we had here. And it wound up being a very intricate phasing schedule that really delivered gates, a few at a time because it was so complex. But once the pandemic hit in March of 2020, I said to the team, well, should we do something different? And we all got together, and the airlines were in the room with us. And we figured out that if we scrunched everybody into the phase one portion of the airport once it opened in the fall of 2020, that if we set up a robust hard stand operation, we could take the entire old airport down all at once. And so it created some pain. We took that pain up front, but it made this phasing very much simpler. So we delivered phase one for the west side of both concourses, and then immediately took down the old airport, which allowed us to phase our way through the east side of Concourse A and the central tunnel and the east side of Concourse B. So we'll now be delivering really the second half of the airport through gates in October of this year, October of next year, and October of the following year.
That's exciting. I've got a really exciting topic to talk about: maintenance. It's one of the things that a lot of folks, I think, don't understand, that is incredibly important to keep in mind during design. So it's the top of mind for airport operators, and because they know how difficult it is to maintain these facilities that serve millions and millions of people per year. So can you share how to incorporate maintenance considerations into our design process here?
Well, we, like I said, we have the Department of Airports engaged right from day one, and the maintenance folks were not shy about telling us what they wanted. And so we incorporate as much of that into the facility as we can. In fact, here's an example. All of our public restrooms have a chase that is incorporated into the facility. The restrooms are set up so that there's two sides that are very similar, so that you could clean one side, keep the other side open, and there's a chase in between. And that chase has, a door, and you can actually walk in there and do maintenance. Not everybody would do that because it's a certain amount of square footage that you're now giving away, so to speak, that could be used for other uses. but it was one of the things we incorporated that will really be a benefit to the maintenance team for years and years and years.
That's great. We got one question, and the question is just a pretty recent one about the art program, and I think that might be appropriate for us to tackle. Can we speak a little bit more about the kind of consolidated art program and the canyon design?
Yeah, Mike.
I
I
think
can.
just let me just kind of kick it off,
Yeah.
and then you can jump in, Alan. The right way to do art in a facility like this is from the beginning. So the art really needs to be, as Matt said way at the beginning, it needs to be a part of the architecture. So we have an artist, Gordon Huther from Napa, California, who was selected very early on and brought in as the commissioned artist to do particular certain art in the facility. We had public art calls, like Alan mentioned, for Whimsy Walls and some other locations. But all of the big stuff that's integrated into the building was really designed along with the building.
Yeah, as Mike mentioned, we started very early on with integrating the art, and Gordon joined the team kind of right after the visioning sessions we were doing. We talked about the sense of place, and the canyon became kind of the organizing element, how the building was going to be laid out. Gordon's group joined us right after that visioning, and then he built on that vision about how this canyon could really relate to the beauty of the slot canyons that run throughout Utah and into Arizona, and how those elements might come together. So the canyon that you've been looking at, that element, those are actually cloth pieces that he designed and then integrated onto the overall canyon. And they can change color. And Mike, I forget exactly, it's like 10,000 different colors or something we have that can change for any occasion. It's just an amazing way that's been integrated together.
That's great. And I think that's a great example of art and architecture integration right there. I mean, right? I mean, we came up with the idea of the slot canyon to try to organize the space and the architecture and the path of travel and the experience and all the programmatic elements along the way. And Gordon, as the artist, took that idea of the canyon and just made it real. So it was a successful partnership for sure. We have another question about inclusion, and I think this is a really good one to talk about a couple of things. I think, Alan, you mentioned the kind of the sectional organization and how it's really meant to be much more of a, you don't change. You can actually go through this facility as an O&D passenger and park your car and then go through the gateway, drop your bags, go through ticketing, security, and go to your gate without changing the levels. And on the way back, you hit the bag claimant before you hit it's the same level. That's one. The other one that I think might be interesting is our approach to restroom design. And so I don't know if you want to talk about that from an inclusion point of view.
Well, I think, as Mike was mentioning, the restrooms, we started off with saying, with the director of the airport at the time, Maureen Riley, she took over like design of restrooms, making sure that they were the right size, the right spaces. She traveled around to really make sure that Salt Lake City would have the best restrooms in the world for size and organization. So right off the bat, we looked at the placement of them so that you never have to go more than 150 feet to any restroom in any direction from wherever you might be in the airport. So it was really important to make sure everybody had easy access to it. Mike mentioned about being able to divide the restrooms up and deal with them for different groups coming in. There's also family restrooms that are all part of that. Throughout the airport, we made sure that those restrooms which are so important as people are departing and coming off of their aircraft. That's the first thing they're looking for, that it was an element that was actually very inclusive, bringing different people, groups, and users into this space that was quite comfortable. And again, you'll see it all the way very organized up and down the concourses.
And all of the women's restrooms have, a mother's room or a lactation room, whatever you want to refer to it as a private space, a private room that mothers can use, and that's in every women's restroom in the facility.
Yeah, public and private. Yeah, that's great. I think we have. I think we're going over our time. I would like to say that we had thank you for all the panelists who participated in today's LinkedIn Live. And kind of address this project in a wider audience. It's a lot of fun. And I just want to say to those who want some more information, you can go to slcairport.com, and there's a wealth of information there. You can also feel to reach out to any of us, and we'll see if we can give you what you're looking for. Thank you for all of your time, and take care.